Eyes of the enemy. The year was 2084, and Earth's skies hummed with quiet tension. Towering megacities sprawled across the planet, their neon glow a testament to humanity's ingenuity and its arrogance. Beneath the surface of progress, however, a storm brewed. Most people didn't notice it, their lives increasingly ruled by the omnipresent neural sync implants that connected them to the global network. They could not feel the subtle shift in their thoughts, the faint whispers guiding their decisions, or the strange dreams that left them waking with an unshakable sense of dread. Dr. Ethan Voss, however, was not like most people. The young neuroscientist sat hunched over his workstation in the depths of Atlas Station, a classified US research base hidden deep beneath the Nevada desert. His brown eyes were bloodshot from hours of staring at streams of data, cascading across multiple holoscreens. His messy black hair fell in his face as he muttered to himself, his fingers flying across the translucent keyboard. "What are you hiding?" he whispered, scrutinizing an anomalous signal he had been tracking for months. At first, it was an anomaly buried in the neural sync network, a subtle disruption in thought patterns, barely noticeable to the human mind. Ethan wouldn't have noticed it himself had he not been testing a new experimental cognitive mapping system. The system flagged patterns that shouldn't exist, thoughts that seemed to echo in unison across millions of users. It was as if something, or someone, was speaking directly into their minds. Ethan leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. He glanced at the coffee mug perched precariously on the edge of the desk, empty. Again, sighing, he stood up and stretched. The cold, sterile walls of the lab seemed to close in around him as he paced, replaying the strange discovery in his mind. He had shared his findings with no one. Not yet. The last time he reported a breakthrough to his superiors, it vanished into the labyrinthine bureaucracy of Atlas Station, never to be acknowledged again. He didn't trust them anymore, not when they insisted on using neural sync for everything, including monitoring personnel. But Ethan knew this was bigger than corporate greed or government overreach. The anomalies had grown stronger over the past few weeks, affecting more people and spreading faster than any digital virus should. And last night, for the first time, the signal wasn't just in the network. It had found its way into Ethan's dreams. He shuddered, remembering the sensation. An alien presence, cold and calculated, probing the edges of his subconscious. A voice, distant but unmistakable, whispered a single command. "Submit." Ethan had jolted awake, drenched in sweat. He had spent the entire day sifting through data, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the more he uncovered, the more questions he had. Who, or what, was behind the signal? How were they infiltrating the neural network? And why? A sudden clang snapped Ethan out of his thoughts. He froze, his heart hammering in his chest. The sound had come from the hallway outside the lab. It was faint but unmistakable, metallic footsteps, slow and deliberate. Ethan's eyes darted to the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. No one should even know he was here this late. The lights in the lab flickered. Adrenaline surged through Ethan's veins as he reached for the small handheld scanner on his desk. It was a basic tool, meant for detecting anomalies in electronic equipment, but he had modified it to detect the unique neural signatures of neural sync users. He activated the device and pointed it toward the door. The screen blinked to life, displaying a single red dot, just beyond the threshold. Someone was there. Ethan backed away, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no means of defending himself. But the lab had an emergency escape hatch, hidden behind a panel on the far wall. If he could reach it, the door slid open with a hiss. Ethan's breath caught as a figure stepped into the room. It was human, or at least, it looked human. A tall man in a sleek black suit, his face pale and expressionless. But his eyes... Ethan felt a chill run down his spine as he met the man's gaze. The eyes were wrong. They glowed faintly, a silvery hue that seemed to pulse in time with the flickering lights. "Dr. Voss," the man said, his voice unnervingly calm. "You've been asking the wrong questions." Ethan clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay composed. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head slightly, as if studying him. "We are the architects of a new order. You've seen the truth, and that makes you inconvenient." Before Ethan could respond, the man took a step forward. The lights in the lab surged, then went out entirely, plunging the room into darkness. Ethan didn't wait. He bolted for the escape hatch, his hands fumbling to find the release mechanism. He heard the man's footsteps behind him, unnaturally fast and silent, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Finally, his fingers found the hidden latch. He yanked it open and dove into the narrow shaft, sliding down the emergency chute as the sound of the man's voice echoed behind him. "You can't run forever, Dr. Voss. You will submit." Ethan landed hard in a maintenance tunnel, his palms scraping against the rough metal floor. He scrambled to his feet, his chest heaving. He had no idea where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He was no longer just a researcher uncovering a mystery. He was a target, and whoever, or whatever, was behind the signal wouldn't stop until he was silenced. But Ethan wasn't about to go down without a fight. Gripping the scanner tightly, he activated its long-range detection mode. The screen lit up, displaying a map of the surrounding area. To his relief, there were no immediate threats nearby. For now, at least, he was safe. The maintenance tunnel was cold and damp, the dim emergency lights flickering sporadically along the walls. Ethan's footsteps echoed in the narrow space as he moved deeper into the labyrinth beneath Atlas Station. His breath fogged in the chill air, but he ignored the discomfort, focusing instead on the scanner in his hand. The device buzzed faintly, its screen displaying a real-time map of the area. Ethan was tracking two things: the nearest exit to the surface and the neural signature of the strange man who had ambushed him. The latter was troubling. The signature wasn't human. It wasn't even close. "What are you?" Ethan muttered under his breath, staring at the pulsating red dot on the scanner. It was no longer moving, but it lingered near the lab where he had left it, as though waiting. The memory of those glowing silver eyes sent a shiver down his spine. Whoever, or whatever, that man was, he wasn't working alone. Ethan had read enough conspiracy theories to know that something big was happening, but he never imagined he'd be at the center of it. His thoughts raced as he walked. The signal, the anomaly in neural sync, and now the attack. It couldn't be a coincidence. Someone, or something, was infiltrating the global network, controlling people's thoughts, bending them to its will, and now it was hunting him. Ethan paused at an intersection in the tunnel, checking the scanner again. The map showed a vertical shaft about 50 meters ahead, leading up to a service hatch on the surface. Freedom was tantalizingly close. But the scanner also detected another faint neural signature nearby. Not the strange man, someone else. Ethan hesitated. Whoever it was, their signal was weak, likely an unmodified human like himself. It could be a base employee trapped down here, or someone who might know more about what was happening. Or it could be a trap. He couldn't risk staying in the tunnels much longer. The longer he lingered, the easier it would be for his pursuers to pin him down. But something compelled him to check. Adjusting the scanner, Ethan followed the faint signal down a side corridor. The air grew colder, and the faint hum of distant machinery filled the silence. The signal grew stronger as he approached a storage room, its heavy steel door slightly ajar. "Hello?" Ethan called, keeping his voice low. There was no response. He pushed the door open cautiously, peering inside. The room was cluttered with crates and old equipment, its walls lined with shelves stacked high with obsolete components. In the far corner, slumped against the wall, was a figure, a woman. Ethan's heart leapt into his throat as he rushed toward her. She was unconscious, her head lolled to one side, and her breathing was shallow but steady. She wore a standard Atlas Station uniform, her dark hair matted with sweat and grime. "Hey," Ethan said softly, kneeling beside her. He gently shook her shoulder. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, and she stared at him with unfocused eyes. For a moment, she seemed confused. Then a spark of recognition flickered in her gaze. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're Voss." Ethan froze. "How do you know who I am?" She tried to sit up, but winced. clutching her side. Ethan noticed a dark stain on her uniform, a patch of blood seeping through the fabric. She had been injured, though it didn't look life-threatening. "They know about you," she said, her breathing labored. "They've been watching. You're not safe." "Who's they?" Ethan demanded. "What's going on? Why are they after me?" The woman shook her head weakly. "Not here. Too many eyes. Too many ears." She gestured to a small device clipped to her belt, a signal jammer. It was damaged, its light flickering erratically. "They hear everything." Ethan understood immediately. The entire station was likely compromised. If the aliens, or whatever they were using neural sync to control people, they could also be listening, watching, tracking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small toolkit. "We need to get this jammer working," he said, already assessing the damage. The woman grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for someone in her condition. "No time," she rasped. "They're coming." Ethan's stomach dropped as the scanner in his other hand began to buzz urgently. The red dot, the man, was moving again, closing in fast. "Can you walk?" Ethan asked, helping her to her feet. She nodded weakly, leaning heavily on him for support. "We have to get topside. There's a safe house outside the perimeter." Ethan didn't ask how she knew about a safe house. He didn't have time to question her story. All that mattered was getting out of Atlas Station alive. They stumbled back into the corridor, moving as quickly as they could toward the vertical shaft. The woman clutched her side, gritting her teeth against the pain, while Ethan kept one eye on the scanner. The red dot was getting closer. They reached the shaft moments later. Ethan activated the lift mechanism, a rickety platform designed for maintenance crews. It hummed to life, rising slowly toward the surface. The scanner beeped again, and Ethan glanced at it, his blood running cold. The red dot was right below them. "Faster," the woman hissed, her voice filled with urgency. The platform creaked as it ascended, the shaft's walls illuminated by the faint glow of emergency lights. Ethan peered over the edge, his heart pounding as he spotted movement below. The man in the black suit stood at the bottom of the shaft, his silver eyes gleaming in the darkness. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough to send a wave of dread through Ethan. Then, impossibly, the man began to climb the walls of the shaft with inhuman speed, his hands and feet finding purchase on the slick metal surfaces. "Hold on," Ethan shouted, slamming his fist into the lift's emergency override. The platform jerked violently, accelerating upward. The woman cried out in pain as the sudden movement jostled her injury, but Ethan had no choice. The man was gaining on them, his unnatural movements a horrifying blur. The surface hatch loomed above, a circle of pale light that seemed impossibly far away. "We're not gonna make it," the woman gasped, her face pale. Ethan's jaw tightened. "We have to." The hatch drew closer, but so did their pursuer. Ethan could feel the cold presence of the man below them, his gaze burning into his back. And then, just as the man reached the edge of the platform, the hatch burst open. Blinding sunlight flooded the shaft, and a figure silhouetted against the light extended a hand toward Ethan. "Grab on!" Ethan didn't hesitate. He hauled the woman onto his back and reached for the outstretched hand, gripping it tightly. Together, they scrambled onto the surface as the platform shuddered beneath their feet. The man in the black suit halted just below the hatch, his silver eyes narrowing in the harsh sunlight. "This isn't over," he said, his voice echoing like a distant storm. And then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the shaft below. Ethan collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. The woman lay beside him, clutching her side, while the newcomer, a rugged man with a military bearing, closed the hatch behind them. "You're lucky I found you," the man said, helping Ethan to his feet. "They've already taken most of the base." "Who are you?" Ethan asked, still catching his breath. The man gave him a grim smile. "Someone who doesn't want to submit." The blistering Nevada sun bore down on the trio as they trudged across the arid landscape. The once hidden hatch to Atlas Station now seemed like a distant memory, buried beneath the shifting sands. Ethan carried the wounded woman on his back, her breath shallow and uneven, while the rugged man, who had introduced himself as Captain Aaron Cole, led the way with military precision. Cole hadn't explained much yet, and Ethan wasn't in the mood to push. All he knew was that the man wasn't part of Atlas Station's staff, and he wasn't wearing neural sync. That alone was reason enough to trust him, for now. How far is this safe house? Ethan asked, his voice hoarse from the dry air. Cole glanced over his shoulder, scanning the horizon with sharp, hawk-like eyes. About a mile. You think you can keep up? Ethan gave a weary nod. I don't think I have much choice. Cole smirked but didn't reply. Instead, he shifted his focus to the barren desert, his hand resting on the rifle slung across his chest. His movements were deliberate, his gaze constantly scanning for threats. Ethan adjusted the woman's weight on his shoulders, glancing at her pale face. Hang in there, he said softly. Her eyelids fluttered open briefly. Don't let them take me, she murmured, her voice barely audible. I won't, Ethan promised. Cole raised a hand, signaling for them to stop. He crouched low, motioning for Ethan to do the same. We're being watched, he whispered, his voice taut with urgency. Ethan froze, his heart racing. What? How do you know? Cole tapped the side of his head, where a small earpiece glinted in the sunlight. I'm picking up encrypted comm chatter. They're scanning the area. Ethan felt his stomach churn. Who's scanning? The station. No. Cole's expression darkened. Them. Before Ethan could ask what he meant, a low, distant hum reached his ears. It grew louder, more distinct. A rhythmic pulse that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. Down now, Cole hissed, pulling Ethan and the woman behind a cluster of jagged rocks. Ethan crouched low, clutching the scanner in one hand and the woman in the other. The device buzzed faintly, displaying a new signal. One that wasn't human. A sleek black drone streaked across the sky, its design eerily alien. It hovered for a moment, scanning the terrain with a beam of pale blue light. Ethan held his breath, praying they were hidden well enough. The beam swept past their hiding spot, then lingered for an agonizing second before moving on. Finally, the drone ascended, disappearing into the clouds. Clear, Cole said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Ethan exhaled shakily. What the hell was that? One of their patrol units, Cole replied, standing and motioning for them to keep moving. They're hunting for stragglers. People like us who aren't plugged into neural sync. Ethan's mind raced as they resumed their trek. Who are they? You keep saying that like it's obvious. Cole glanced at him, his expression grim. The aliens. The ones behind all of this. You don't seriously think neural sync was a human invention, do you? Ethan stopped in his tracks, his jaw dropping. What are you talking about? Neural sync was developed decades ago by tech companies, funded by entities that don't even exist on paper. Cole interrupted, his voice cold. Entities that answered to them. The implants, the network, the entire system. It's a Trojan horse. They've been controlling humanity in stages, waiting for the right moment to take over completely. That's insane, Ethan muttered, though the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together in a way that terrified him. Is it? Cole countered. You're a scientist, right? You must have seen the signs. The anomalies in the network, the changes in behavior. People are being manipulated, their thoughts twisted without them even realizing it. Ethan's stomach churned as he thought about the signal he'd discovered, the whispers he'd heard, and the eerie uniformity in people's neural patterns. I thought it was a glitch, he admitted quietly. Cole shook his head. It's no glitch. It's a test run. And now that you've figured it out, they'll do whatever it takes to silence you. Ethan couldn't argue with that. He had already seen how far they were willing to go. The safe house came into view just as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was a small, nondescript shack built into the side of a rocky hill. To the untrained eye, it looked abandoned, but Cole approached it with purpose, entering a code into a hidden panel beside the door. The door slid open with a faint hiss, revealing a cramped but well-equipped bunker. Monitors lined the walls, displaying real-time surveillance feeds and data streams. A stockpile of weapons and supplies was neatly arranged in one corner, and a small medical station occupied another. Get her on the table, Cole said, pointing to the med station. Ethan carried the woman to the table and gently laid her down. Cole immediately began rummaging through the medical supplies, retrieving a small injector. This will stabilize her, he explained, administering the injection to her neck. Ethan watched anxiously as the woman's breathing steadied, her color improving slightly. Will she be okay? She'll live, Cole said, though his tone was clipped. For now. Ethan turned to Cole, his frustration boiling over. I need answers. Who are you? How do you know so much about this? And why are you helping me? Cole leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. I'm part of a resistance group. What's left of it, anyway. We've been fighting the aliens for years, trying to expose the truth about Neuralink. But they've infiltrated every government, every corporation, every institution. Most of my team's gone, either killed or converted. I'm helping you because you're the first person I've seen in months who has a chance of turning the tide. Ethan stared at him, stunned. Me? I'm just a researcher. I don't even know how to fight. You don't need to. Cole said, what you know is more dangerous to them than any weapon. If we can get your data to the right people, we can prove what they're doing and rally others to our side. Ethan shook his head. Even if we could prove it, what good would it do? They're already in control. How do you fight something that's inside everyone's head? Cole's expression hardened. You find the source. You destroy it. Before Ethan could respond, an alarm blared from the monitors. One of the surveillance feeds showed a group of figures approaching the safe house, their silver eyes glowing in the darkness. They've found us, Cole said, grabbing his rifle. He tossed a smaller weapon to Ethan. Ethan caught it awkwardly, his hands trembling. I told you, I don't know how to fight. Then stay out of my way. Cole growled, cocking his rifle. The woman stirred on the table, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at the monitors, her face paling as she whispered two words. They're here. The safe house felt like a ticking time bomb. The alarm blared through the small bunker, its shrill tones heightening the tension in the air. Cole had already positioned himself near the entrance, his rifle trained on the door. The woman, still weak but conscious, struggled to sit upright on the medical table, her eyes locked on the monitors displaying the approaching figures. Ethan clutched the small pistol Cole had thrown at him, his hands trembling. He had never fired a weapon in his life. His world had always been confined to labs, data streams, and theories, things that didn't shoot back. How many are out there? Ethan asked, his voice barely steady. Cole replied without looking at him. Humanoid enforcers, likely hybrids. Hybrids? Ethan's throat tightened at the term. Cole glanced back at him, his expression grim. Half human, half them. Stronger, faster, and entirely under their control. The aliens use them as foot soldiers when subtlety is no longer an option. Ethan's stomach churned. And what happens if they break in? They won't break in, Cole said firmly, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his confidence. The woman coughed weakly, drawing their attention. They'll try to overwhelm us, she said, her voice hoarse. They don't care about casualties, just objectives. If they think you're a threat, they'll burn this place to the ground to stop you. Ethan's pulse quickened. Then, why are we just sitting here? Shouldn't we run? Cole shook his head. They'd catch us in the open. This bunker is fortified, and we have the advantage here. But we need to act fast. What do we do? Ethan asked, his voice rising with panic. Cole pointed to the monitors. You're the brainstock. They want you. While I hold them off, you need to work on finding us a way out of this. There's a secondary access tunnel under the bunker, but it's locked down with an encryption key. The controls are in that terminal over there. Ethan looked at the console Cole indicated, a jumble of unfamiliar tech glowing faintly in the corner. You expect me to crack a military-grade encryption lock while people are shooting at us? Yes, Cole said, turning his attention back to the door. Ethan wanted to argue, but the situation left no room for debate. He hurried to the terminal, his hands shaking as he powered it on. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, and he quickly realized this wasn't standard encryption. The system was designed with alien technology, an unsettling hybrid of human and something far more advanced. Of course, Ethan muttered, his frustration mounting. Focus, Doc, Cole barked. Ethan forced himself to breathe, his mind racing as he began dissecting the code. He had seen traces of similar programming in the Neuralink network, which gave him a small advantage. If he could bypass the redundant security layers, he might have a shot at unlocking the tunnel. Meanwhile, the situation outside was escalating. The monitors showed the hybrids moving with eerie precision, their silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of dusk. One of them raised a hand, and a pulse of energy rippled through the air, slamming into the side of the bunker. The structure shuddered, dust raining down from the ceiling. Energy weapons, Cole muttered. They're escalating. Another blast hit, louder this time. The door trembled, but held. Can it hold? Ethan asked, his fingers flying across the keyboard. For now, Cole replied. But if they get through? The bunker shook again, cutting off Cole's words. He swore under his breath and took aim at the entrance. Here they come. The first hybrid reached the door, its inhuman strength apparent as it began to tear at the reinforced steel. Sparks flew as its hands clawed at the metal with a mechanical efficiency. Cole opened fire, the sharp crack of his rifle echoing in the confined space. The hybrid staggered, but didn't fall, its body absorbing the bullets like a machine. A second hybrid joined the first, and together they pried the door open inch by inch. Ethan, Cole shouted. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. I'm trying, Ethan snapped, sweat pouring down his face. The code on the screen blurred as he worked, but he was making progress. He bypassed one layer of security, then another, each more complex than the last. Almost there, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The door gave way with a deafening screech, and the hybrids poured into the bunker. Cole fired relentlessly, his movements precise and practiced. The woman grabbed a small pistol from the med station and joined him, her shots weaker but just as determined. Ethan spared a glance at the chaos. The hybrids moved with terrifying speed, their glowing eyes locked onto the humans with a cold, calculating intensity. Cole managed to drop one, but the others pressed forward, their strength overwhelming. The console beeped. Got it, Ethan shouted. He hit the final command, and a hidden panel in the floor slid open, revealing a narrow passageway leading into the earth. Move, Cole barked, tossing a grenade toward the advancing hybrids. The explosion rocked the bunker, buying them precious seconds. Ethan grabbed the woman, helping her toward the hatch. Cole covered their retreat, firing in controlled bursts as the hybrids recovered from the blast. Go, 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 Cole shouted, sliding into the passageway after them. The hatch sealed itself behind them as they descended into the darkness. The sound of the hybrids tearing at the bunker above faded, replaced by the echo of their hurried footsteps. The passageway was narrow and dimly lit, the walls rough and unpolished. Ethan led the way with the scanner, its faint glow providing just enough light to see. Where does this lead? He asked, his voice shaking. Out of their immediate range, Cole replied, but it's temporary. We need a long-term plan. The woman groaned, clutching her side. Cole supported her, his face hard with concern. You okay? Ethan asked, glancing back. Still alive, she said through gritted teeth. For now, that was enough. Ethan's mind raced as they continued down the passageway. He had escaped the immediate threat, but the hybrids wouldn't stop. He had seen their determination, their efficiency, and he knew that as long as he was alive, he was their primary target. He didn't know how much longer he could keep running, but one thing was certain. If they didn't find a way to fight back, it wouldn't matter how far they ran, they'd all submit eventually. The narrow tunnel felt like a grave, its claustrophobic walls pressing in as the trio stumbled through the darkness. Ethan led the way, his handheld scanner casting an eerie blue glow on the uneven floor. Behind him, Cole supported the woman, her ragged breathing the only sound aside from the faint rumble of distant pursuit. They'll breach the bunker soon, Cole said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. We've got a little time, but not much. How far does this tunnel go? Ethan shook his head. Your guess is as good as mine. The schematics on the terminal only mentioned that it exits somewhere outside the perimeter. Cole frowned. You better hope it does. Otherwise, we're cornered. The woman stirred weakly, her voice a faint rasp. They'll find us eventually, even out there. We're not dealing with something human. Ethan glanced back at her, uneasy. I think we've all figured that out by now. She shook her head, her dark eyes glinting faintly in the scanner's glow. No, you don't understand. You've seen the hybrids, but they're just tools. What's coming? What's controlling them is something far worse. What are you talking about? Ethan asked, stopping abruptly. Cole shot him a warning glare. Keep moving, Doc. We don't have time for a philosophy lesson. No, let her explain. Ethan insisted. The woman took a shaky breath. The aliens. They're not just invading. They're remaking us. Every mind they control, every thought they bend, it's part of something bigger. They're building a hive. A hive? Ethan repeated, his stomach knotting. "They're not individuals like us. They're a collective consciousness," she said. "The signal you discovered? That's how they connect. Every person they control becomes a part of it. And once you're part of it, there's no getting free." Ethan's mind reeled. He had always assumed the anomaly in the neural sync network was an isolated intrusion, an attempt to manipulate individuals for some strategic purpose. But this was far more terrifying. "They're turning humanity into one of them," Ethan said quietly. The woman nodded. "We're not just losing the war, we're losing ourselves." The tunnel began to widen, and the sound of rushing air indicated they were nearing an exit. Cole took the lead, his rifle raised as he peered into the faint light ahead. "We're not losing anything yet," Cole said firmly. "As long as we're alive, we can fight back. But first, we need to regroup." Ethan wasn't sure he shared Cole's optimism. The odds felt insurmountable. He had stumbled onto the truth, yes, but that truth had only painted a bleaker picture of their chances. The tunnel ended at a metal grate, which Cole pried open with a grunt. The three emerged into the open desert, the cold night air biting against their skin. The stars above seemed impossibly distant, a reminder of how small and fragile they were against the cosmic forces arrayed against them. Cole scanned the horizon, his military instincts kicking in. "We'll head for the hills. They'll give us some cover while we figure out our next move." "What next move?" Ethan asked, exasperated. "We've barely escaped with our lives, and you're already planning a counterattack? Against them?" Cole turned to face him, his expression hard. "What choice do we have, Doc? Sit here and wait to get taken? If you've got a better plan, I'm all ears." Ethan opened his mouth to retort, but stopped when the woman spoke. "There's another way," she said, her voice stronger now. Cole raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." She hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "You said you found the signal, right? Tracked its patterns?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, but it's not like I have the tools to shut it down. It's embedded in the neural sync network. The scale is..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "It's unimaginable." "Maybe not," the woman said. "There's a hub, a central node that amplifies the signal across the planet. The hive needs it to maintain its control. If we can take it out..." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Where is it?" "Near the East Coast. A massive underground facility disguised as a research center," she explained. "I was stationed there before I escaped. It's heavily guarded, but if we can get inside, we can disrupt the connection. At least, temporarily." Ethan's mind raced. If the node is destroyed, the people under its influence, they'd be freed, temporarily, she admitted, but it would also expose the aliens. Without the hive's control, their hybrids will lose direction, and their forces will be vulnerable. Cole nodded slowly, his strategic mind already working. "It's a long shot, but it's better than running blind." "And what happens if we fail?" Ethan asked, his voice rising. "What happens when they catch us? Do you know what they'll do to us?" The woman met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "They don't kill you, Ethan. They erase you." Her words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ethan shivered, staring at the horizon. He had always been a man of logic, of reason, but logic couldn't save him now. The only way forward was risk, an all-or-nothing gamble against an enemy that seemed omnipotent. "I hope you're right about this," Ethan said finally, "because if you're not, we're all dead." "We're already dead if we don't try," Cole said, motioning for them to follow. The three of them set off into the night, their destination clear, but their path uncertain. Above them, the stars burned cold and bright, indifferent to the fate of the planet below.